We've all heard this. Dominant to tonic resolution. But what makes it so special? Last week I talked about how root motion can influence harmonic function. I've used the circle of fifths to explain dominant root motion before, but there's other reasons why these chords function the way they do, namely the leading tone. The leading tone is one of the most important notes in the key, and it's just located a half step below the note of the key itself. So for C, it's B. For G flat, F. We usually hear this resolution from T to Do, but in theory it can be applied to any set of notes, including secondary dominant progressions. It's kind of why they work the way they do. And while the most common way to employ these is through secondary dominants, there's a whole other class of chords called, you guessed it, secondary leading tone chords. Let's take a look. If we voice the dominant chord with the third on the bottom, that is, in first inversion, we can really highlight that T to Do half-step resolution. Because the function of this chord basically hinges around this ascending minor second, we can discard the root in favor of other chord extensions. If we substitute the flat 9 for the 1, for instance, we get a diminished seventh chord. Technically 4 of them. 9 for 1 would give us a half diminished seventh chord or minor 7 flat 5 chord. Sharp 9 gives us a diminished major seventh chord, or in this case, B flat over B. And as long as the leading tone is in a prominent place in this chord, the function will remain intact, provided it plays nicely with the melody. This leads to some of the other substitutions that I put on screen that could all potentially work in place of a G7 chord. Now these will all work with a G7 chord, but we can delve a little bit deeper into the realm of chromaticism. You'll notice all of these chords contain an altered fifth of some sort, to create either a tritone or an inverted major third. But we can use a perfect fifth-based chord as well. The sharp 4 to 5 resolution is super strong, so we can use some of these chords as substitutes, even though they don't really contain that dominant function. A B major triad, for instance, is the perfect chromatic approach chord to C. All of the notes ascend by half step. All of them. Here are some other perfect fifth-rooted chords and their functions. What if a leading tone appears elsewhere? We've seen it as a root in these B chords, and as a third on the G chord. But it could also be used to create an A-flat minor type chord, since C-flat and B are enharmonic pitches. Or as the fifth on an E major type chord. Or as the flat 7 on a D-flat dominant 7 type chord. You see where I'm going with this. Basically, using the leading tone as a chord tone can give you a dominant function if contextualized properly. And while some chords might work better than others, the important thing to focus on here is the voice leading and how it works in the context of the piece. So get out there and make some changes to your leading tones.